Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler Noble. I'm the owner and founder of Noble Flight Simulation. This is my partner, Austin Fang. I'm coming to you from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Austin's from Long Island, New York. So this is our second, I guess the last one we went to was actually up in Connecticut when it was the Flight Sim Con. We didn't go to Vegas last year, but definitely having a fun time this year. So a lot of familiar faces that have come around the booth and asked questions and pushed some knobs, and now gotten some feedback from you guys. So thanks a lot. So please, by all means, I can see you through these lights. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Like I said, this should not take us the full 30 minutes, so we should not be pressed on time. So please feel free to interrupt and ask any questions. So what we're going to talk about here is kind of the mission statement: who we are, why we do what we do, and when did it start, and why. A little bit about us as a company, the different hardware options that we have. We have just a regular standard G1000. We also have a G1000 CIRRUS Perspective version. And then kind of where we're going, what are the next steps, and what we plan to do in the future. So let's get to it. So kind of when I got into flight simulation back in, gosh, I think it was 2004. That's when I was getting my instrument rating. And I didn't want to spend as much time in the cockpit getting my instrument rating to maintain that proficiency, to be able to get that rating at 40 hours. That was important to me to try to make myself as efficiently as possible. And that's really what got me into flight simulation. And I realized back at that time there was really very few options out there that were within my reach at the time, and a lot of the reach of people, as far as a good hardware option that was able to help me meet my goals. And so what we have done is we offer now not only a regular G1000, but we also have the most, in my opinion, the most realistic CIRRUS Perspective flight deck out there. It has a true form and function of the real CIRRUS, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But we are based here in the U.S. in the Southeast. We're in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, as I said. The information for us is here. If you haven't been to our website before, you can go there. It's www.nobleflightsim.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. We don't have a huge social media presence. I'm trying to get a little bit better about that, admittedly. So like we talked about several years ago, we saw that there was a pretty big gap in the general aviation community, especially for the CIRRUS platform. There's a lot of CIRRUS pilots out there who are a lot of CIRRUS pilots out there who really wanted a good simulation hardware platform, and the options have been fairly limited. And the options out there were really catering more towards the big flight schools, the professional builders making $50,000, $75,000 platforms. And so we kind of set out to create a hardware platform that was incredibly high quality, and that is something that could not only be used by the professional clients, and we have professional clients all over the world. We've got our units in multiple professional simulators and certified simulators in literally all over the world, but to people who just want it to have on their desktop, to be able to use at home to practice approaches and do those types of things. So our hardware, so this is our standard G1000, and it's gone through multiple different variations and improvements and changes. The first one didn't have any backlighting to the buttons, and it didn't have any backlighting to the bezel, and that was good, and a lot of people liked that. But when we were trying to get something that was a little bit more realistic, and you put it into a cockpit that you wanted to simulate the nighttime approaches, that's when we added the backlighting to the buttons. And so the version 2 was when we had backlighting to the buttons. And then that was great. People were excited about that, but then they were like, well, hey, what about the bezel? If I'm really in a nighttime scenario here, I can't see the backlighting on the buttons. So now our units are fully backlighted, not only the buttons but the bezel as well. And we've added some voltage regulators. We have a MOSFET on there so that we can actually dim our LED buttons We have the pulse width modulation on there so that you can actually simulate the dimming function, so it's not just like 100% bright in your face, which can be very distracting at night. You can actually put a little potentiometer on there to dim it down, or you can actually dim it through our software as well. So that's something that's actually really, really nice. So about the G1000, a little bit of the specifics about that. It is a very high quality industrial LED backlight display. It's got good viewing angles all the way around. It's the same resolution as the standard G1000, the updated one. The original G1000, a lot of people don't know, the original G1000 was actually an 800 by 600 resolution, but now they're all the 1024-768, so that's what we use as well. We do have different configurations, so we don't just have one size fits all. We have different autopilot configurations. So this one right here, I can't really see, but this one looks like the GDU 1045. So that's going to be something that you would see like in a Bonanza, a Baron, or a Beechcraft Baron, or a Bonanza. We have the most common one that most everybody is familiar with is the GDU 1045, and that's what's in the Cessna, the NAV3. 44B? Yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, the 1044B. And then the other one that we offer here is the 1042, and that's one that's going to be found more in like several diamonds. Also, the DA-40, DA-42, and 62, the Columbia, Tigers, and those types of aircraft as well. And then we do have another panel that doesn't have any buttons for the autopilot. That's what we call the GDU 1040. And so that's, by default, that is going to be the PFD, because the buttons are only usually on the MFD. But people who use like a Cessna with a CAP 140 or something like that, and they don't have the integrated GFC 700 on the bezel, that's a good fit for them. So the CIRRUS hardware, this is where, this is probably our most popular piece of hardware here, because it's different than a lot of the other CIRRUS options out there in that it truly has the 12.1-inch displays. It has the angled center trim piece, and it has the drop-down keyboard here that you can just set on your desktop and use. It also, probably the biggest thing that separates us from a lot of the other people that are making a CIRRUS is that we have the true CIRRUS configuration style of knobs, and a lot of the other people are just using the standard G1000 with the 10.4-inch displays with all the regular buttons of the standard G1000, and they're adding on a GCU, which works and is fine, but this one specifically has the CIRRUS style knob configuration. So short of getting the real CIRRUS hardware, the real Garmin hardware, we're pretty comfortable to say that this is about as realistic as it can be. And this also has the dimmable backlighting as well. Very, very good high quality displays. Again, because it's the same as the real aircraft, it's the 1024-768. It's the 12.1-inch display. The viewing angle on this one is absolutely incredible. So if you come by the booth, you can take a look. It almost looks just as good as if you're looking at it at 90 degrees. So the viewing angle is outstanding. It's a very, very great monitor. And so the big thing that we've been working on for the past 3 years, and this is what Austin has been helping us with, is we have been kind of silently in the wings making up our own G1000 simulation software, because our mission was to provide a platform that is not only as realistic as it can be, as far as what we want is for people to get out of the airplane, sit in front of our simulator, and be able to push the buttons and turn the knobs and do the procedures as if they were really in their aircraft. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all really want. We want it to be as close, one-to-one, to how it is in the actual aircraft. And so getting something ultra realistic was goal number one. Now goal number two was something that was completely user friendly. And although nobody here in this room is an idiot, but we want somebody who has no computer savvy at all to be able to put this in, plug it in, and have it work. It just needs to work. Because at the end of the day, 90% or more of the people who are going to be using this stuff don't really have any interest in configuring this and setting this configuration file and tweaking this and setting that. And flight simulation can be complicated enough. We wanted something that you just plugged in, you didn't have to worry about a configuration, the screens just maximized, went to the right place, and you're good to go. And so those have been our two goals all along. And so our software is definitely getting us to that point. We have a good working beta version that we're saying is about 90% complete. The main areas that are still yet to be finished are the terminal procedures, and we're actually working with some partners here to make that happen quickly. And then the finalizing the last bits of the autopilot. But the foundation for everything else is done. And if you haven't, I see a lot of familiar faces, but anybody who hasn't come by the booth and checked it out, I definitely encourage you to do so. The initial release will be compatible with, yeah, Bill?
Would you say you're VFR ready right now?
I would definitely say we're VFR ready, yeah. I think our flight planning is working. There's a couple little, things that need to be improved upon as far as just the menus and things like that, known issues. But as far as the meat of the software, you can load in a flight plan, you can do a direct to, you can do a flight plan with different waypoints. All of the engine instruments, all of the primary flight display or primary flight controls and instruments are working. So yeah, great question. And we do work with prepared version 4, and we're also shortly after our release with P3D, we're going to be also supporting X-Plane. Oh, 32 and 64-bit compatible, I'm being told, yeah. So some of the other goals of our software when we were coming up, we wanted it to be a standalone program that didn't necessarily rely on the simulator to run. We didn't want to just have a plug-in to make it work with that. We wanted it to be truly independent so that we had as much flexibility as possible. And that also makes it a lot easier to configure and set up. We also wanted to make sure that it was as efficient as possible because the average person wants to be able to put this on a single machine. They don't want to have a second machine and network it in. And some of the other options out there utilize a lot of resources. And in order to really run your simulator and run it well, and then also run the G1000 simulator, you really need to have a second machine in order to do that, unless you're spending a lot of money on just one single machine. So we wanted to make sure that we were running as lean as possible. And just as just as an example of that, our installer file is measured in megabytes, whereas most of our competitors are measured in gigabytes. So we are running incredibly lean in regards to that. We are going to offer both with and without bezel configurations. Now, we're not entirely sure yet as far as the initial release is going to be with the hardware. So when you purchase the hardware, the software will be included with that, and then there will be certain options for purchasing without hardware, but we have to still iron out those details specifically. You can rescale the screens to fit on different displays. So if you are, is the battery going dead? So if you're trying to use the software with a different type of, and not our hardware, you can resize it to fit a monitor that you use. And also a big thing that we wanted to target was the training situation. Yeah, thank you. I want to target the training community, because at the end of the day, flight simulation, it's fun, but the real advantage of flight simulation is proficiency in training, especially in the hands of a real-world pilot. So we wanted to be able to bring that as far as maybe a ground station, or what some people would call it, an instructor station, where you can review your flight and look at things and different scenario-based trainings. There's been some interest as far as a search and rescue feature. Now, I'm not saying that we're doing that, but that's, you know, all these things are great ideas that we are potentially going to be looking into. Anything to add there?
Yeah, maybe I'll just...
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just jump in and describe a little bit about our software. So there have been a lot of questions when people come to the booths, and stuff that I didn't think of putting into the presentation because you know, when you're in the weeds doing this, you fail to see the trees in the forest, right? So some people have asked, you know, how does this work only with Prepare 3D or with X-Plane? The way we built this software is we wanted that to maximize that flexibility. So it is platform agnostic. So what we did was we sectioned it out into different layers, and we have a data access layer that could be swapped out for Prepare 3D to replace it with X-Plane, to replace it with, in the future, DCS World, or, you know, whatever other flight sim program you want. And the way that it does that is those hooks get replaced and everything else follows through. The UI and all that is very, I guess, structured correctly. The other thing is we actually built it up with the individual LRUs. So if we know about the G1000 system, we know about the air data computer, we know about the GMU44, we know about the GRS 77, GFC 700 if it's equipped with that. We built all of that in. So in the future, when we want to fail an avionics box, we just do so. And that way we hope to, you know, everything all falls into place. So we took very good care in terms of how we structured it and the architecture of the software. Yep.
Which is, yeah, very, very important as far as when you're talking about software development and whatnot, you want to try to be as foresighted as possible and try to think about these things. So we spent a lot of time, even before we even started writing anything, to say, well, what is our goal? Number one, we want it to be realistic. We want it to be easy to use. And we want to make sure that we have as much training and all these different variables, and so definitely very important to us. So these are some of the screenshots. This is obviously with the graphical bezels. Sorry. Is this going backwards? Yeah. Yeah, so with the graphical bezels, and this, these are just highlighted so that you can see where the buttons are. That's not necessarily how it would look. But I mean, this is your stuff. Do you want to talk about this stuff?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why don't I?
You're probably more.
Okay. So the screenshots, this shows with the bezel currently being displayed. If you have a display, you can put it up right now. We're still talking about how we want to provide the end solution to our customers. Do we want to provide it with our hardware only, be able to sell the software independently? You know, we'd be interested in hearing your feedback as well. But as it stands right now, these highlighted buttons, say, for example, you have it on a touch screen display like it is on my laptop, you can actually push it and everything would register. You can actually have it just on a display, use a mouse. And then the next screen is obviously with the bezels removed, and you use it with our hardware. So yeah, there's just a couple of screenshots there. As we described before, the basic flight attitude indicator, airspeed, altimeter, they're all working. HSI functionality, navigation through the VORs, they're all up and running. So we feel like we have a good working beta. And something that we didn't mention before is that we'd love to take applications for beta testers who want to be working with us, people who have time with the G1000 that know it and say, hey, this is not right. So when we go through it, we're all real world pilots. I'm actually kind of low time. I'm about 150 hours, but we study up on the manuals and we try to get as much time in the real G1000 as possible. But we miss things. So through the help of the community, we can definitely try to implement as many of these features as possible. So for here, oops, sorry, can we go back? Yeah. As we said before, the flight planning. That's a very, very complicated thing. We're going to be implementing Victor Airways next when we get the procedures and the terminal procedures data from Navigraph. So we can enter in the Victor Airways and other terminal procedures as well. So that's coming. But as of now, you can enter in all these waypoints and intersections. VORs are going to be implemented very, very shortly. So yeah, we're kind of well on our way there. Something that we did put in is already the checklists, emergency checklists, regular normal operations. So section, I believe, 5 out of your, or 7 out of your POH. So yeah, next steps. We talked about this beta release of the G1000 simulator software. We're looking for early adopters who want to sign up and be part of our beta testing program. Please contact us. And we also have obviously a nice discount and make it worth your while. The release of the G1000 simulation software, we're aiming at before the end of the year. I think at this show we were ready enough to kind of spill the beans and really try to get people excited about what we're trying to do here. Next steps beyond that, more features of the G1000. A lot of people have been asking about the synthetic vision, also night vision. And then going beyond that, we would love to do a ground station for our flight analysis, navigation planning, instructor feedback, and then beyond that even develop these scenarios that are tied into Prepare 3D and X-Plane. You know, how nice would it be to purchase a bundle and have all these training scenarios built in that when you just press start, you're already configured there. There's a little intro, and you're trying to see how you perform under these conditions to try to train yourself and make sure that you're safe and proficient. So IFR approaches, holds, emergency situations, yeah, and then just basically all the I guess stuff that the G1000 offers. Yeah, distribution models, we're talking about, just the regular, you purchase it, either a one-time fee or subscription basis. We're still in open talks about that. But one of the things that we think is very, very interesting is this next one. So say, for instance, you're an instrument student that you're ready to go and embark on the instrument rating. You know, you want to do something right away. Why not rent it? You know, we'll provide it at a cost per month. And you go through your training, you kind of, blow through it, and the barrier of entry is lowered for you. It is, this is what we're about. This is a tool to help people. And we, like we said in our mission statement, we want to make it attainable for the average pilot. We don't want this $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 investment that's going to be hanging over your head in order to do something. Yep.
Yeah, and I could talk about that a little bit more, because I think that is definitely something that is nobody else is doing, at least that I'm aware of. If you guys know of anything, I'd be curious to see how they do it. But a rental model, there's a huge number of people out there who, especially like Austin said, when they're working on their instrument rating or when they're working on a type rating for a CIRRUS or something like that, where they have an incredible amount of use out of one of these simulators, but I just cannot justify spending X number of dollars to get this whole thing set up and running. But I would spend this much money if in a rental type situation, because if you look at how much you'd be spending in the cockpit versus if you could be doing that at home with this rental unit, well, at what point is that price point worthwhile? And so I think that's something that we're kind of excited about offering. And it wasn't really until we decided that we were going to do our own software could we do that, because then it would get a little bit, well, we're doing a rental unit, but the software that it's running, the license, how does that work? Because it's going on to all these different people. So we didn't even really touch that. But now that we own now that we have the software ourselves, it keeps everything nice and clean, and it should hopefully benefit a lot of people. We're going to get custom packaging for these things. So you get the unit, you unpack it, you save the packaging, you keep it for as long as you need to, and then you put it back in the packaging and you send it back. So that's something that I think will catch on. All right, yeah, I said I'd try to keep it kind of short, and we got a couple minutes here for questions. Yeah. So I'll let Austin talk about the navigation.
So it will come with a default outdated or as up to date as when we release it data set from Navigraph. But we do recommend that if you want to be as realistic as possible, you maintain that subscription with Navigraph, and we'll try to do it as seamlessly as possible. Does that answer the question? Okay. Right. So I believe right now we are only checking to see if the P3D is running on the local computer. We will have to write in new methods and program in the ability to look over the network for an existing P3D instance. And so that's something that we will do, but it does not do that right now. X-Plane right now is our next go-to as soon as we're done with the P3D. Again, we will have to go through with the local machine first and then look at it over the network.
And I think you bring up a good point, because I think it's important to say that even though a lot of people don't want to run it on a networked machine, there's a lot of people where that's a requirement, and you need to be able to do that. So even though you don't have to run it on a networked machine, that will be something that we will accommodate as well, because there are a lot of situations where running it on a networked machine, especially for our professional builders who are building these big elaborate rigs, they want a dedicated machine for just the G1000, and we will certainly accommodate that as well.
I have a comment. I like to use virtual reality. I don't need your hardware, but I buy airplanes and use them. Their software for the PFD and LFD is very poor at best. If you could interface your software to these airplane builders, let them be free to build airplanes, and you be free to do the software part of it, and they would have a much better product in the end, and you could use it with virtual reality, and then swap over and use it with your hardware as well on the same machine.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, when we started really coding this about 2 years ago, we talked about that. You know, we kept hearing, hey, VR is going to be the next best thing, right? I personally feel that AR, augmented reality, is going to be the next thing. So virtual reality, we've been promised this thing is up and coming, but you really can't see out the front. So I think we really do require, and some of the newer ones like HTC Vive, I believe, and the Oculus Rifts are now providing you with a camera out front, so you can see some stuff. It is, but it's going to get better. And so this augmented reality, what that does is, you know, you stay in the virtual space, but you can kind of see what's in front of you for these buttons. And what we envision is something that you do want that tactile feedback, and you do want to know where your hand is going, right? So we are syncing everything with P3D, and in the future with X-Plane. The reason why we're doing it, it's hard to do that. You know, you see some of our competitors that don't do that. There's a reason for that. It's very, very difficult to keep that sync in place. So why we're doing that is because in the future, when we do go to virtual reality, we can actually do that. When you'll turn a knob in there, our frequencies match up with the frequencies in the flight sim, and it keeps us flexible that way.
All right, anything else? Yeah.
Curiosity, I'm new to the system, the first time here, so I'm learning as we go. You got a G1000, I assume that's all you're going to do, or you're going to go, I don't know, what's right, backwards for some of the smaller navigation units?
Yeah, so we get asked a lot whether we're going to do like the GNS 430, the GNS 530. And those are great platforms, and there's a lot of demand out there for that. But there's also a lot of good companies that make that, and it's a platform that's really been out of production for a long time. So we want to be a little bit more forward-thinking than that, rather than making something that's, you know, even the G1000 is actually becoming a legacy platform now. You know, so it's going to be replaced with a lot of these things. So we didn't think that we needed to reinvent the wheel with people. There's a lot of good options out there, so we did not look at that. But as far as what we our future thoughts, and, there's a lot of options out there, not only in the general aviation, but, there's the Rockwell Collins, there's Honeywell, there's also the whole line of Garmin touchscreens, the G2000, G3000, all of these things. So there's a lot of potential out there, and we're just trying to, I think our next steps, in not to put something out there that's this far out in the future, but after we get where we are now with our software and get it working well on X-Plane, that's our short-term goal. Our next goal will probably be to bring the CIRRUS Perspective Plus to market with the G6 GCU and everything like that. So that'll probably be our next goal, because there's a lot of people out there who desperately want that. Yeah.
Are you working with any aircraft manufacturers?
Real or simulated? Okay, last question, sorry. We have actually, since we've been here, been talking to a couple different ones. So there's a lot of interest on both sides, ours and theirs, to make some type of partnership work. So yeah, those relationships have just started, so I don't have any information more on that, but that is definitely a consideration, yeah. If anybody else has any more questions, we'd love to talk to you either out here in the foyer or over at our booth if you haven't come to look at our stuff. Like I said, I really feel that I can confidently say that we have some of the most realistic hardware, especially for the CIRRUS. So love to see you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.